Hello, and welcome back to the DIY hosting of a WordPress website video series. In this video series, I've been showing how you can host a website and email server on a Raspberry Pi with the traffic going through your home router. The idea of doing so is that you don't have to pay a hosting company to host your website and your email server. You can do it yourself. So if you have admin access to your router and if you have a Raspberry Pi, you have everything you need to host your own website. Now, up to now in this video series, we've managed to get a website, specifically WordPress in this case, running on your Raspberry Pi with the necessary database going through your router on port 80. But it isn't encrypted, which means you can't store personal information, and for WordPress you can't even log in safely, which is a big problem for a CMS. Additionally, people and browsers don't trust a website that doesn't have a HTTPS connection. So in this video, we're going to continue on from the last video, and we're going to set up the SSL, or more correctly, the TLS certificate to provide our website with HTTPS capability. First then, let's have a quick review of where we got to in the last video so that we can pick up where we left off. So in the last video, we set up an Nginx Docker container to complement our existing Docker setup, which consisted of a WordPress container and a SQL container, which we had previously shown were working together in harmony, going through our router out on port 80, and we were rendering that website out on the internet. We put the Nginx Docker container in between in the last video just to set it up, to pave the way for having a reverse proxy manage our encryption. Now, we configured our Nginx container using a config file, which we wrote and then copied over to the container at startup using a copy command in the Nginx Docker file. This way, the default image that we get from the Docker registry isn't what's running. It's the default image modified by a custom config file. Now, the config file we wrote was very simple. It was written simply to pass traffic to and from the WordPress container, nothing more. We also added the Nginx container to the Docker Compose file so that it could be brought up alongside the WordPress and SQL database when we type in docker compose up -d. The very last thing we did was we proved that the Nginx reverse proxy was functioning correctly alongside the WordPress and SQL containers by confirming that the Nginx welcome screen was replaced with the WordPress website in the browser. This proved that these three containers were functioning correctly with each other, and that all we had to do now was further modify the configuration of Nginx to allow us to perform encryption. So let's now move on to have a look at how we create a certificate for HTTPS and how we're going to modify our setup to allow its use. So the first thing we're going to do, and this is going to be done in this video, is we're going to use Let's Encrypt to obtain our certificate. This is a little bit more complicated than it may first seem, because we're going to obtain what's called a wildcard certificate, which allows us to use multiple subdomains and under the same certificate. In the following video, and what may be the last video in this series, we're going to open up port 443 on our firewall to let our traffic through. And that's because HTTPS works by default on port 443. So when a user types in HTTPS followed by your domain, it's port 443 that'll be hit on the router, and we need to allow that through so that we can see it. And the last thing we're going to do, again probably in the last video, which is the next video, we're going to configure Nginx to use the certificates that we've obtained in this video. By the end of all of that, you should have a fully functional website running with HTTPS on your Raspberry Pi, which will conclude the first part of the DIY hosting of a WordPress website. So let's move on then to the desktop where we're going to obtain our Let's Encrypt certificate. Okay, here we are on my desktop. I've SSH'd into my Raspberry Pi already, so I'm at my user's home directory, and the first thing I'm going to do is install a package. So if you follow along with what I do, apt get install, I'm going to sudo this, certbot -3 -certbot -dns -cloudflare. So what this is doing, it's installing two packages. The first one is certbot, and the second one is a plugin for certbot to allow us to get a wildcard certificate for Cloudflare. So it's two things in one. Okay, so that's finished. I'm going to clear my screen. So With that done, we now have certbot installed, which will be used to retrieve the Let's Encrypt certificate. And we've installed the plugin which is necessary for us to get Cloudflare to provide us with a wildcard certificate. With these two things done, we're now going to create a secrets folder in which we're going to put a configuration file for Cloudflare so that it has our API key information. So if you follow along with what I do, I'm going to create the secret directory file, mkdir.secrets. The dot basically says it's a secret folder. And then we're going to change the permissions, chmod 0700 and then .secrets. There we go. Okay, so now we need to navigate into that folder, cd.secrets, and we're going to create the cloudflare.ini file. So I'm going to use Nano as my text editor. So nano cloudflare.ini. And in here there are two lines of text we need to put in, and they look as follows: DNS_Cloudflare_email equals, and then the other one is DNS_Cloudflare_API_key equals. And they're both, the right hand side are encapsulated with speech marks. In here you need to put your email account which is associated with your Cloudflare account. So whatever email address you used when you set up Cloudflare needs to be written in here. In this one, you need to put your global API key. You can find this by logging into Cloudflare, and under the overview section, which is one of the tabs, I think it's the first button at the top. Once you're on that screen, in the bottom right, you'll see some text which says get your API token. This text is a link, and if you click on it, you'll go to another screen on which there will be something written that says global API key. If you see that button, there'll be a view button next to it. If you click on view, you will then be able to retrieve your API key. I'm not doing this because I don't want to give away my public API key on the internet, but that's what you do. So I'll just repeat that. Under the overview tab within Cloudflare, go to the bottom right hand side and you'll see a button that says get your API token. If you click on that, it'll take you to another screen where it will say global API key, and next to that there should be a view button. If you click on the view button, you'll get your global API key, which you can then paste into this section here on the second line. So I'll do that now, and when I've finished I'll clear my screen so that we're back to a clean environment, and we'll carry on with the setup. Okay, so I've entered my credentials as well now. We just need to change the permissions of the file we've just created. So if you type in chmod 0400, they're the required permissions. And then we'll just say home directory, which is the Pi directory for me, /.secrets/Cloudflare_ini. I'm using tab there just to accelerate the process. Press enter. Great, that's permission set, so I'll just clear the screen. So now we just need to create the actual certificate. So if you copy along with what I type in, we type in the following. I've made my terminal really big, by the way, hopefully huge so you can see it quite clearly here. I'm going to type in certbot. Oh, actually, before we do, we need to make sure it's sudo. So sudo certbot cert only --DNS -Cloudflare -DNS -Cloudflare -credentials. Then we need to type in the path to our Cloudflare ini file, which for me, and maybe for you, it's home pi /.secrets/Cloudflare ini. And then the last thing, sorry, not the last thing, but the most important thing is the -d option, where we're going to have a wildcard, then a period, and then the next thing is going to be your domain name. So mine is single-entity.com, yours will be different. And then the last thing to do is to type in --preferred challenges space DNS. I'm now regretting making my screen so big. I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. DNS 01 -01. So there you go. That's the full command. Sudo certbot cert only DNS Cloudflare credentials, followed by the path to your Cloudflare ini -d wildcard dot your domain --preferred challenges and then DNS 01. So when I press enter, it's going to ask me for an email address. That's for recovery purposes. So I suggest you put one in that you have set up, a nice safe one, and it'll ask you to accept terms and conditions. So if you just run through that process, and I'm going to run through that process outside of this video, and I'll meet you back at the command line with a cleared screen in just a minute. Okay, so here's my cleared screen. I'm at my home directory. So the certbot command line utility has used Let's Encrypt to provide us with a wildcard certificate for our domain. So it will have created a new directory on your computer and it's located here. So let's navigate to it. cd, etc, and then Let's Encrypt. This is the location of our new certificate. Press enter. ls. So we've got some folders in here. Now these certificates live in the live folder, but we can't navigate into it as pi, as the user pi, because the folder is owned by root. So I'm going to type in sudo su, and now I'm going to go into the live directory, cd live, and what we can see is a folder with the same name as my domain. So I'm going to navigate into there, and here we go, ls, and there are our certificates. So this is where they exist. But remember, these exist on our Raspberry Pi at the moment. They don't exist in our Nginx container, which is where they need to be, because it's our Nginx container, which contains our reverse proxy, which requires the certificates. So in the next video, we're going to set up our Docker configuration to make sure that our certificates end up in the Nginx container in the right place, and that we're going to edit the Nginx config file to point to them so it knows where to look for the certificates. With that done, and a small change also to the Docker Compose file and a small change to our firewall, we'll have everything done and you will have a HTTPS enabled website. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do like it if you have, and please do subscribe to my course if you find it interesting. I'll be producing lots of new content on interesting things to do with Raspberry Pis once this video series is finished. And yeah, check out the next video for the concluding part of this series. Thank you very much.